In the year 1396, St. Paul's Cathedral in London gleamed with hundreds of candles, dancing against the Gothic stained glass, while the organ resonated through the imposing arches, announcing a royal procession advancing down the central aisle. But this was no ordinary ceremony. It was the wedding of a 6-year-old child. Isabel of France, Europe's youngest princess, walked toward the altar where Richard II, King of England, awaited her, a man of 29 years. Dressed in golden silks that dragged across the stone floor, the little girl could barely support the weight of her tiny crown. Within minutes, she would be declared Queen of England, sealing a political alliance that would change the destiny of 2 nations. How did such a small child become the center of medieval diplomacy in its most brutal form? To understand Isabel's tragic fate, we must return to the 14th century in France, when the kingdom lived under the shadow of royal madness. Isabel was born on the 9th day of November in the year 1389 at the Louvre Palace, daughter of Charles VI of France and Isabel of Bavaria. She was the 4th daughter of the royal couple, a princess born in dark times that would mark her entire existence. Her father, Charles V of France, was known as Charles the Mad due to episodes of insanity that had afflicted him since the age of 24. During his crises, the king did not recognize his wife or children, believed he was made of glass and would shatter if anyone touched him, or fled through palace corridors, screaming that invisible enemies pursued him. France plunged into chaos, governed by regents who fought for power while the true king remained prisoner of his own mind. Isabel's mother, Isabel of Bavaria, was an equally controversial figure. Ambitious and unscrupulous, she took advantage of her husband's illness to accumulate power and wealth. The chroniclers of the time described her as a dissolute woman who kept lovers while neglecting her children. For Isabel of Bavaria, daughters were valuable commodities in the European political game, destined to seal alliances through arranged marriages. Little Isabel grew up in this toxic environment, surrounded by palace intrigues and political instability. France was torn apart by the 100 Years' War against England, by conflicts between Armagnacs and Burgundians, and by the consequences of royal madness. For a sensitive child, witnessing her father's crisis and her mother's calculating coldness created traumas that would accompany her throughout her entire life. In the year 1396, when Isabel was only 6 years old, a diplomatic opportunity arose that would change her destiny forever. Richard II of England, after years of war against France, sought peace to consolidate his internal power. He had lost his first wife, Anne of Bohemia, and needed a new matrimonial alliance that would bring political and financial stability. The French advisors, led by the Duke of Berry, saw in the English request a golden opportunity. They proposed the marriage between Isabel and Richard, offering a gigantic dowry of £800,000 and a 28-year truce. For France, bankrupted by war, it was an irrefutable opportunity to buy peace with the sacrifice of a child. The negotiations lasted months and were conducted with the coldness of commercial transactions. French and English ambassadors discussed terms as if Isabel were cattle being sold at a fair. Her age, considered extremely young even by medieval standards, was a topic of debate. Some English advisors argued it would be better to wait until she turned 12, an age considered appropriate for consummating matrimony. But Richard II was desperate. He faced internal rebellions, devastating financial problems, and the constant threat of deposition. French money and external peace were more important than considerations about the bride's age. In October of the year 1396, the terms were settled. Isabel of France would be delivered to England as a political gift, a child sacrificed on the altar of royal diplomacy. Isabel's farewell from the French family was a spectacle carefully orchestrated to impress the English ambassadors at the Louvre Palace. Charles V of France, in one of his moments of lucidity, blessed his little daughter with tears in his eyes. Isabel of Bavaria, on the other hand, demonstrated her usual coldness, treating the separation as a successful business deal. Little Isabel did not fully understand what was happening. For her, the trip to England was an adventure, perhaps temporary. She took with her only a few toys, her favorite dolls, and a little pet dog that had accompanied her at the Louvre Palace. The French retinue that escorted her included hundreds of nobles, servants, and a special guard destined to protect the treasure. The journey from Calais to London lasted several weeks and was marked by grandiose ceremonies in each English city they crossed. Local authorities competed to offer the most sumptuous receptions to the future queen. But Isabel, exhausted and intimidated by the excess of pomp, cried frequently and asked to go home. In London, Richard II prepared a wedding that would rival any royal ceremony of the era. St. Paul's Cathedral was decorated with French and English fabrics intertwined, symbolizing the union of the two kingdoms. Thousands of candles, imported from France, illuminated the environment, while choirs sang in Latin and French. It was a spectacle designed not only to impress subjects, but to demonstrate to the world that England had conquered peace through diplomacy. Richard II himself presented as a reluctant but determined groom. At 29 years old, he was considered one of the most refined men in Europe, a lover of arts and literature. He had deeply loved his first wife, and the prospect of marrying a child visibly embarrassed him, but political necessities superseded any personal consideration. During the ceremony, Isabel remained silent, clearly intimidated by the grandeur of the event. The Archbishop of Canterbury had to kneel to place the ring on her tiny finger while she looked around, searching for familiar faces that were no longer there. Upon being declared Queen of England, she showed no joy, only confusion and growing fear. Isabel's life in the English court was initially protected by the circumstances of her age. Richard II, to his credit, treated her more like a daughter than a wife, providing French tutors, allowing her to maintain her native customs, and ensuring that she was raised with royal dignity. Isabel received her own apartments in Westminster Palace, a manor house, and servants dedicated exclusively to her well-being. But the child queen's happiness was brutally interrupted in September of the year 1399. Richard II, facing a rebellion led by Henry Bolingbroke, was deposed and subsequently murdered at Pontefract Castle. Isabel, at 10 years old, became a widow, without ever having been truly a wife. Richard's death created a political dilemma for the English. Isabel was a legitimate queen, but her marriage had never been consummated, and she had no heirs. Worse, still the dowry of £800,000 had already been spent, and returning her to France would also mean restoring money that no longer existed. Henry IV, the English king, initially tried to keep Isabel as a golden prisoner, hoping to use her in future negotiations with France. The young widow was kept in comfortable captivity at Havering Castle, where she spent 3 years fighting for her freedom. Her desperate letters to French relatives reveal a girl who had matured prematurely through suffering. "I write to you in tears, for I am kept here as a prisoner, far from everything I love, without hope of return." Her pleas finally touched the heart of Charles VI, who in one of his moments of lucidity categorically demanded his daughter's return. In the year 1401, after long diplomatic negotiations, Isabel finally returned to France. But the girl who had left Paris at 6 years old had transformed into a young woman of 12, aged prematurely by traumatic experiences. The return to the Louvre did not bring the expected happiness. France continued plunged in chaos, and her family received her more as a political inconvenience than as a beloved daughter. Isabel's tragedy, however, was far from over. In the year 1405, at 16 years old, she was again used as political currency when her mother arranged her second marriage to Charles of Orleans, a young French poet and nobleman. This time, however, Isabel conquered something that had been denied to her in childhood, a marriage based on mutual affection. Charles of Orleans was sensitive, intellectual, and genuinely in love with Isabel. The couple found happiness in the arts, in poetry, and in a love that flourished despite the political circumstances of their union. Isabel finally experienced what it was like to be loved for herself, not for her value as a negotiating piece. But happiness was ephemeral. In the year 1407, Charles was captured by the English at the Battle of Agincourt and spent 25 years as a prisoner in England.
Isabel, again a widow in practice, returned to solitude and dependence on the French royal family. Life had robbed her twice of the possibility to love and be loved. In the following years, Isabel lived discreetly in the French court, dedicating herself to charity and the arts. Her experience as a child queen of England had given her a unique perspective on politics and diplomacy, knowledge she used discreetly to advise other members of the royal family. In the year 1409, Isabel gave birth to her only daughter, Joanna of Orleans, a child who would grow up without knowing her father. Motherhood brought her some consolation, but also the bitter irony of knowing that her own daughter would probably face the same destiny, being used as a political instrument in arranged marriages. Isabel of France died in the year 1409 at 20 years old from postpartum complications. Her death passed almost unnoticed by the chroniclers of the time, a stark contrast to the pomp that had surrounded her first marriage. Isabel of France had fulfilled her role as a political piece, generating an heir and sealing alliances, but had never had the opportunity to live for herself. The story of Isabel raises profound questions about the role of women in medieval politics and the human price of royal diplomacy. Her experience illustrates how children, especially girls of nobility, were treated as transferable properties between kingdoms, their lives entirely subordinated to the political interests of fathers and husbands. More than 600 years later, the tragedy of Isabel of France continues to resonate as a dark reminder of the horrors of child marriage and the objectification of children for political purposes. Her story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about how entire societies normalized the sacrifice of innocence in the name of greater interests. The little princess who was delivered as a political gift never truly had a childhood. From 6 years onwards, she carried state responsibilities that should have belonged to adults. Her life was a continuous sacrifice to the gods of medieval politics, a price paid for temporary peace between enemy nations. Isabel of France remains an eternal symbol of childhood vulnerability before uncontrolled political power. Her memory reminds us that behind every diplomatic treaty, every royal alliance, and every political marriage in history, there were frequently children whose lives were destroyed to satisfy the ambitions of the powerful. The girl who became queen at 6 years old paid the supreme price for peace between France and England, her own happiness, and ultimately, her life. But the Middle Ages, with its holy crusades and fierce inquisitions, guarded even darker secrets in the shadows of castles and convents. While the church preached chastity and condemned the sin of the flesh with bonfires and excommunications, forbidden sexual practices flourished in secret, tolerated by necessity, hypocrisy, or pure convenience. Today, we reveal these hidden truths, stripping away the veil of sanctity to expose the raw reality of an era that publicly condemned what it practiced in hiding. Sacred prostitution in temples and brothels disguised as taverns was not mere urban legend. In cities like Paris in the 13th century, municipal brothels were regulated by authorities, taxed like any commerce, and even protected by the crown to maintain social peace. Married men, clerics, and nobles frequented these places, arguing it was better to channel carnal impulses than risk adulteries that destroyed powerful families. Chroniclers like William of Nangus recorded that in the year 1280, King Philip the Fair turned a blind eye to Parisian lupanars as they prevented revolts among oppressed soldiers and artisans. But the best-kept secret was that of nuns and monks who violated vows of chastity in isolated convents. In monasteries like Fontevraud in the 12th century, powerful abbesses kept lovers disguised as servants, while monks traded sexual favors for ecclesiastical promotions. Documents from the Vatican archives reveal that in the year 1194, Pope Celestine III received complaints of nightly orgies in French abbeys, but chose to cover up to avoid scandals that would weaken the church. Sodomy, condemned as the sin of Sodom and punished with death at the stake, was secretly practiced by knights and squires in the Crusades. During the Third Crusade in the year 1189, Richard the Lionheart shared his tent with Philip Augustus of France in relations that chroniclers like Roger of Hoveden described as more than fraternal. tolerated because they united armies against the infidels. Even incest, the most taboo of taboos, found loopholes in the nobility. Marriages between cousins were common to preserve lineages, but closer relations occurred in secret. In the year 1320, Queen Isabel of England, known as the She-Wolf of France, maintained an affair with Roger Mortimer that shocked the court, but was tolerated by Edward II, whose own relationship with Piers Gaveston raised suspicions of homosexuality. Bestiality, punished with hanging for both man and animal, was whispered in rural villages where isolated shepherds sought company in flocks. Ecclesiastical tribunals in the 14th century recorded cases where confessors absolved sinners in an exchange for silence, preferring discretion to public exposure. And pagan orgies survived disguised as folk festivals in Bavarian forests in the 15th century. Peasants celebrated Walpurgis Night with rituals that included group sex, tolerated by feudal lords who participated anonymously. Hypocrisy reached its peak in Inquisition tribunals, where inquisitioners like Bernard Guy in the year 1323 interrogated heretics about sexual sins while maintaining concubines in secret residences. These tolerated secrets revealed the Middle Ages not as an era of purity, but of human contradictions. The church condemned what it could not extinguish, and society turned a blind eye to preserve order. Forbidden practices flourished because the flesh was weak and power always accommodating. These hidden truths remind us that behind the facade of crusades and cathedrals pulsed a humanity as complex and flawed as our own. The Middle Ages was not a monster, but a distorted mirror of repressed desires, where the forbidden was practiced in secret so the world could continue turning. And so while kings fell and child queens suffered, the secrets of the flesh remained buried, waiting for brave historians to bring them to light.